In motorcycle racing, riders spend years chasing victory, but sometimes it takes less than a second to lose everything. A bike bursting into flames at over 100 miles per hour, a 5-time Isle of Man TT winner fighting to keep his leg, a MotoGP champion forced to jump from a motorcycle with no control, and crashes so close to tragedy that millions of fans still can't believe everyone survived. Today, we're counting down 10 of the most terrifying motorcycle racing incidents ever caught on camera, moments that shocked the racing world, pushed riders to their absolute limits, and changed careers forever. These aren't just racing accidents, they're the moments that proved one terrifying truth. When you're riding at the limit, survival is never guaranteed. It looked like another routine lap. The crowd watched as Taylor Mackenzie charged through Snetterton, pushing his British superbike to the limit. Nothing seemed unusual until he felt something wasn't right beneath him. At first, it was only heat. Then came a small flash from the front of the bike. Within seconds, flames burst from the airbox, growing larger with every meter. Taylor glanced down and froze. His motorcycle wasn't just overheating anymore. It was on fire while still traveling at more than 100 miles per hour. There was no time to think. Staying on the bike meant risking the flames. Jumping off meant hitting the track at racing speed. Trusting instinct over hesitation, Taylor threw himself clear. His burning motorcycle continued down the circuit without a rider, completely engulfed in flames before finally stopping near the barriers. Against all odds, he escaped without life-threatening injuries. But in just a few terrifying seconds, his race and his championship hopes had disappeared in smoke. As shocking as that fire was, it still wasn't the most life-changing moment on this list, because the next rider went from making motorcycle racing history to fighting for the future of his career. Just weeks earlier, Ian Hutchinson had achieved what many thought was impossible. He dominated the Isle of Man TT, winning 5 races in a single week, a legendary feat that cemented his place among the sport's greatest riders. But racing can change everything in an instant. Later that year, during the British Superbike Championship at Silverstone, heavy rain turned the circuit into a deadly trap. Grip vanished, visibility dropped, and every corner became a gamble. On the opening lap, Hutchinson lost the front of his bike and crashed hard. At first, it looked like the kind of accident riders usually walk away from. Then another motorcycle came straight toward him. With nowhere to go and no time to react, it slammed into Hutchinson's left leg with devastating force. The injuries were catastrophic. Surgeons performed more than 30 operations, and for a time, amputation became a real possibility. The man who had conquered the Isle of Man TT was suddenly fighting the biggest battle of his life, not for another trophy, but simply for the chance to race again. The opening lap had barely begun. Rain was falling across the circuit, making every corner unpredictable as the riders fought for position. Bruce Anstey was among the frontrunners, pushing hard through the opening turns while John McGuinness led the field. Then everything went wrong. As Anstey accelerated out of the corner, the rear of his motorcycle suddenly stepped out on the soaked surface. Within an instant, he was thrown into a violent high side. Anstey landed directly on the racing line with riders charging toward him at full speed. Among them was Gary Locker. With almost no visibility and nowhere to escape on the wet track, Locker slammed into the fallen rider before crashing himself. For a terrifying moment, motorcycles continued flying past as Anstey lay helplessly on the circuit. One machine came within inches of striking him again. Marshals rushed to the scene as the race descended into chaos. Fortunately, both riders survived. But the crash became another chilling reminder that, in wet road racing, one small loss of grip can trigger a disaster involving everyone behind. Road racing reaches its deadliest form at the Isle of Man TT. There are no runoff areas, only stone walls, trees, and unforgiving roads waiting for the smallest mistake. Few riders embraced that danger more than Guy Martin. In 2015, he was locked in a fierce battle for the lead, pushing flat out through every corner. The rear of his bike suddenly lost grip. Without warning, it snapped into a violent high side, launching Martin through the air before he slammed back onto the road. The crash left him with fractured vertebrae, broken ribs, and a broken sternum. For most riders, injuries like these would have ended a career. Somehow, Guy Martin survived. But the next rider didn't crash because of a mistake. His motorcycle simply stopped obeying him. Casey Stoner had already conquered motorcycle racing. A 2-time MotoGP world champion, he returned in 2015 for the Suzuka 8 Hours. One more race, one more challenge. Everything was under control. Then, at over 100 miles per hour, disaster struck. The throttle jammed wide open. The bike wouldn't slow down. With only a split second to react, Stoner realized there was no saving it. His only chance to survive was to abandon the motorcycle before the corner. He jumped. Seconds later, the riderless bike launched into the air and cartwheeled violently across the circuit. Stoner escaped with a broken scapula and a fractured tibia. It was a terrifying reminder that sometimes the biggest danger isn't the rider, it's the machine beneath them. The 2020 Austrian Grand Prix was unfolding at nearly 200 miles per hour when two riders collided in the middle of the pack. Franco Morbidelli and Johann Zarco made contact, sending both motorcycles hurtling across the circuit without a rider in control. Instead of sliding harmlessly away, the bikes shot back toward the racing line like missiles. At that exact moment, Valentino Rossi and Maverick Viales were arriving at full speed. Rossi barely had time to react as Zarco's motorcycle flew over his head, missing him by only a few inches. Another bike flashed through the gap just moments later. It was one of those moments where the entire paddock stopped breathing. Somehow, every rider walked away unharmed. But the incident became one of the closest calls in MotoGP history, proving that sometimes survival depends on nothing more than a fraction of a second. As unbelievable as that escape was, the next crash showed that the weather can be just as dangerous as any rival on the track. The Moto2 race in Portugal started like any other. Then the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled over the circuit, and heavy rain hit while every rider was still on slick tires. Grip vanished in seconds. One rider crashed, then another. Within moments, more than 10 motorcycles were piled up in the same corner, creating one of the biggest multi-rider crashes the championship had seen in years. Race control had no choice but to red flag the race. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing on a racetrack isn't speed, it's the conditions that change without warning. Richard Milky Quayle knew the Isle of Man TT better than almost anyone. A local favorite, he had spent years mastering the mountain course, where one mistake can change everything. In 2003, he returned determined to impress his home crowd. Everything seemed under control. Then, at racing speed through Balasala, disaster struck. Quayle lost control of his motorcycle and was thrown violently onto the road. The impact was devastating. He suffered life-threatening injuries, including severe damage to his pelvis, spine, and internal organs. Against the odds, Quayle survived. But the injuries ended the career he had devoted his life to. His crash proved a brutal truth. At the Isle of Man TT, even the riders who know the course best are never truly safe. Street circuits leave no room for mistakes. Nowhere is that more dangerous than the Macau Grand Prix, where concrete barriers sit just inches from motorcycles traveling at incredible speed. The 2019 race had only just begun. Then, everything went wrong. Approaching the notorious Police Bend, one rider lost control and crashed directly in front of the pack. In an instant, several riders had nowhere to go. Motorcycles slammed into each other, scattering across the narrow circuit as debris flew in every direction. The track was completely blocked, forcing race officials to red flag the event. For several tense moments, no one knew how serious the crash had become. Remarkably, every rider survived. But the opening lap pile-up became one of the most dramatic crashes in Macau Grand Prix history. Devi Todd arrived at the 2018 Isle of Man TT as one of the sport's rising stars, eager to prove he belonged among the fastest road racers. Then, during qualifying, everything changed. At high speed through the mountain course, Todd lost control of his motorcycle and crashed heavily. The impact left him with serious injuries, including damage to his back and multiple fractures, forcing him out of the event. For a young rider chasing his biggest breakthrough, it was a devastating setback. But the crash didn't end his career. After months of recovery, Todd returned to the Isle of Man TT, proving that surviving one of the world's most dangerous races requires far more than speed, it demands resilience. Every crash you've seen today is a reminder of one brutal truth. On these roads, there are no second chances. At over 200 miles per hour, the line between victory and disaster is measured in inches and a single split second. Yet every year, these riders come back, knowing exactly what's waiting for them. Not because the risk is small, but because the challenge is greater than the fear. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true stories from the world's most dangerous races. Thanks for watching.